I didn't say a word when the HOA president barked that my friend was trespassing. He stood there in his tan uniform, calm as a stone, the badge on his chest catching the afternoon light. The board had called the police themselves, not realizing they were speaking to the highest-ranking law enforcement officer in the county. I just leaned on my truck, folded my arms, and waited for it to dawn on them that this time, the rules weren't theirs to twist. I'd been waiting for that moment for months. It all started quietly, like most HOA horror stories do. When I bought the place, I wasn't looking for a fight. My wife and I had spent 30 years in the city traffic deadlines. Noise and, when our youngest went off to college, we wanted peace. The property sat just outside town, a few acres on the edge of a small lake. A white oak tree leaned over the water like an old friend, and in the evenings, you could hear owls instead of sirens. The HOA brochure promised community harmony and scenic preservation. I thought that sounded reasonable. I rebuilt the deck myself that first spring. Nothing fancy, just solid pine boards, sealed and leveled. My wife planted daylilies by the mailbox, and I fixed up a small workshop beside the garage. I remember thinking how nice it felt to wake up and not rush anywhere. I'd drink coffee on the porch and listen to the water lapping the shore. For a few months, it really was perfect. Then came the letter. It was taped to my front door one morning, bright yellow and full of official language. Notice of violation. My offense. A non-approved structure visible from the road. That structure, apparently, was the workbench I'd installed inside my garage. With the door open on weekends, they said it disrupted visual uniformity. I laughed at first, thinking it was some clerical mistake. Who cares about a workbench inside a garage? So I called the HOA office. The manager, a woman named Denise, sounded polite but dismissive. Rules are rules, she said. You'll need to remove or screen any non-approved construction materials. Construction materials, she meant my tools. I tried reasoning with her, pointing out that nothing was outside, nothing visible from the road unless you craned your neck from the cul-de-sac. She said the board had already voted. That was the beginning of the nonsense. Over the next few weeks, more notices arrived. One for improperly colored mulch, one for leaving my trash bins visible for more than 24 hours post-collection. Kicker was when they fined me for having a fishing boat parked on my driveway. It was a 14-foot aluminum john boat, registered and perfectly legal under county code, but apparently it violated their aesthetic standards. I wrote letters, polite ones at first. I quoted their own bylaw sections about reasonable use of property and non-permanent recreational vehicles. No reply. Then I sent emails. Still silence. When I finally got a response, it was a curt message saying, failure to comply will result in escalation. That's when the frustration turned into something colder. I wasn't new to paperwork. I'd spent 25 years as a civil engineer for the county, drafting floodplain maps and reviewing development permits. I knew exactly how land use worked, and more importantly, I knew how easily people abused it when others didn't. So instead of arguing with Denise, I started reading. I pulled up the HOA's original charter filed with the county clerk. I traced its zoning overlay back to 1998, back when the subdivision was first approved. And there, buried in the archives, was the first crack. The HOA's governing authority applied only to sublot parcels under 1.5 acres. My property was 2.3, meaning they had no jurisdiction over me. Still, I didn't move too fast. You don't reveal the ace before the hand's played. I started documenting everything, photos of every notice, every fine, every letter they left. I took time-stamped videos showing how my boat sat neatly within my driveway and never blocked a sightline. I even recorded a few of their violation inspections, when a board member named Greg would walk right onto my property and snap pictures without permission. Trespassing. Plain and simple. When I mentioned that in an email, they doubled down, threatening to report my aggression to local law enforcement. If I interfered with their authorized inspection activities, that was almost funny, because I knew exactly who local law enforcement was. See, my oldest friend in the world, Frank, had spent his career in that department. We'd grown up together, built tree houses and wrecked bicycles together. He'd gone into law enforcement. I'd gone into engineering. By the time I moved into this neighborhood, he was the county sheriff. Still, I didn't want to drag him into it. I wanted to handle this cleanly. So I sent one last letter, formal, concise, written like a man with time and patience. I cited section 4.3 of their own declaration, outlining property classification, and included a certified copy of my parcel record from the assessor's office. I told them to cease any further actions under HOA jurisdiction until they could legally demonstrate authority over my lot. 2 weeks later, I came home to find a bright orange sign staked in my yard, Final Notice property in violation. The nerve of it. They'd even attached a letter threatening to place a lien for non-payment of fines. That's when I called Frank Iden. They want him to handle anything, guy. Just asked him to accompany me when I went to speak to them. He agreed, mostly out of curiosity. The next Saturday, we drove down to the community center where the HOA held its monthly meetings. I parked right outside, stepped out with my folder of documents, and Frank followed to uniform, badge, sidearm, the whole thing. We walked in mid. Greg, the self-appointed enforcer, immediately jumped up. You can't bring law enforcement into a private association meeting, he barked. Frank raised an eyebrow. You called law enforcement? He said, holding up a printout of their emailed complaint from earlier that week. Apparently, they already reported me for harassment because I photographed their inspector on my property. It was almost too perfect. The room went silent when they realized the man they'd summoned was standing right there. Denise's face, drained of color. I handed him my folder. No drama, no raised voice. These are my parcel records, I said. You'll notice the legal description excludes my property from the HOAS authority. Every notice and fine you've issued is void. Frank added, with that slow, measured sheriff's tone. And any further entry onto his land without permission constitutes trespassing under county ordinance. 11-403. Denise stammered something about reviewing documentation, but the damage was done. Greg tried to argue, said something about neighborhood consistency, but Frank cut him off. Consistency doesn't trump jurisdiction, A sighed flatly. Then he stepped closer, pointed to their complaint form. You filed this knowingly false report. I suggest you withdraw it before I consider it misuse of law enforcement resources. I didn't have to say another word. By the following Monday, every fine, lien, and notice had been rescinded pending review within a week. The entire board resigned due to personal commitments. The HOA held a special election that no one even showed up for. It just collapsed. Turns out, once people realized the leadership had been enforcing illegal fines, nobody wanted to inherit that liability. In the weeks after, neighbors who had avoided me started waving again. A few quietly admitted they'd been fined for ridiculous things to garden gnomis, mailbox colors, even unauthorized porch seating. With the board gone, the subdivision fell under direct county management, which meant normal, lawful regulations instead of made-up ones. Frank stopped by a few times after that. We'd sit by the lake and laugh about it. He said it was the most satisfying call he'd ever responded to, and he wasn't wrong. I'd spent months letting them think they held power. Turns out, all it took was one calm afternoon, one folder of facts, and one very unimpressed sheriff to remind them what authority actually looks like. Life went quiet again after that. My wife's lilies grew taller that summer, and I built a small dock on the water. No one came to measure it. No letters arrived. Sometimes I still see Greg drive by. He slows down, pretends to check his phone. I just nod. We don't have anything left to say. Peace is a funny thing. People think you protected by fighting, but really, you protected by knowing where the boundaries are on, making sure everyone else does too. Now, when new neighbors move in and ask about the I just smile and tell them it's under new management. County management. Lawful management. And if anyone ever feels like testing that again, well, they know exactly who my friend is.